The Aztecs, a true story of power, faith, and collision. When the Mexica entered the Valley of Mexico in the late 1200s, no one expected them to survive. They arrived as outsiders, migrants from the north, poor, landless, and dangerous. Established city-states treated them as disposable. They were forced into the swamps along Lake Texcoco, a place of mud, insects, and flooding. It was land no one else wanted. In 1325, the Mexica founded Tenochtitlan on a small island in that lake. It was not an act of destiny. It was necessity. They had nowhere else to go. What followed was one of the fastest and most improbable rises in human history. Building a capital from water, the Mexica turned geography into a weapon. They anchored their city with stone and timber, then expanded it outward. Causeways connected the island to the mainland, each narrow enough to be defended. Canals became streets. Chinampas, rectangular plots layered with soil and vegetation, transformed shallow water into farmland capable of feeding hundreds of thousands. By the early 1400s, Tenochtitlan had freshwater aqueducts, sanitation systems, and markets that moved goods on a continental scale. The city may have housed 200,000 people, making it one of the largest cities on earth. Its rise was not peaceful. Power through war. Aztec expansion was systematic. Under rulers like Acamapichtli and later Itzcoatl, the Mexica transitioned from mercenaries to empire builders. In 1428, they defeated their former overlords, the Tepanecs, and formed the Triple Alliance with Texcoco and Tlacopan. This alliance became the engine of conquest. Cities were not destroyed. They were absorbed, taxed, and bound through tribute, maize, cotton, jade, gold, and captives. Resistance was answered with force. Compliance meant survival. War had a religious purpose. The Aztecs believed the sun required nourishment. Human sacrifice was not spectacle. It was cosmology enforced by state power. Captured warriors were preferred alive. Death on the altar was believed to sustain existence itself. The Templo Mayor stood at the center of this system, its twin shrines honoring the gods of war and rain. Politics, faith, and violence were inseparable. The empire at its height. Under Ahuitzotl, the empire reached its greatest extent. Military campaigns expanded Aztec control across much of central Mexico. Tribute increased dramatically. Infrastructure projects reshaped the capital. The empire was wealthy, organized, and feared, but it was also overstretched. Flooding projects failed. Conquered peoples grew resentful. Sacrificial demands increased. Stability depended on constant military success. Ahuitzotl died unexpectedly and power passed to Montezuma II, a ruler shaped more by ritual and governance than war. Montezuma II and the crisis of certainty. Montezuma II inherited an empire that looked strong but relied heavily on perception. He tightened control, increased ceremonial formality, and elevated the priesthood. He also ruled during a period of profound anxiety. Natural disasters, unusual celestial events, and social unrest fed a belief that the gods were signaling change. In 1519, reports arrived of foreign ships along the coast. The newcomers, Spanish conquistadors led by Hernán Cortés, were few in number but unprecedented in capability. Horses, steel weapons, firearms, and European tactics created shock and fear. More critically, they brought smallpox, which began spreading before large-scale conflict even started. Montezuma chose caution. He allowed Cortés to enter Tenochtitlan. This decision would define the empire's fate, the capture of a capital. Cortés quickly understood Aztec political structure. Power flowed from the emperor. By taking Montezuma hostage, he effectively paralyzed the state. For months, the city existed in a tense suspension. The emperor issued orders under Spanish supervision. Nobles complied, but resentment grew. When Spanish soldiers massacred Aztec elites during a religious ceremony, the balance collapsed. The city revolted. Montezuma was killed during the uprising. How remains uncertain. His death removed the final restraint on violence. War in the streets. The Spanish were driven from the city during La Noche Triste in 1520, suffering devastating losses. Aztec forces reclaimed control. It was a clear military victory, but disease followed it. Smallpox swept through the population, killing tens of thousands, including the new emperor Cuitlahuac. Leadership collapsed as Cortés regrouped and returned. This time he did not come alone. The siege of Tenochtitlan. In 1521, Cortés began a methodical siege supported by tens of thousands of indigenous allies who sought revenge against Aztec rule. He cut off food supplies, destroyed aqueducts, controlled the lake with armed vessels. Cannon fire reduced districts to rubble. The final Aztec emperor, Cuauhtémoc organized a fierce resistance. Civilians fought alongside warriors. Starvation and disease spread faster than weapons. After months of fighting, Tenochtitlan collapsed. Cuauhtémoc was captured attempting to flee. The city was systematically dismantled. The end of an empire. By August 1521, the Aztec Empire no longer existed. Spanish authorities built Mexico City atop its ruins. Temples were torn down. Religious practices were banned. Survivors were absorbed into a colonial system that erased their political identity. But the Aztecs were not forgotten. Their language endured. Their agricultural methods remain in use. Their worldview still shapes Mexican identity. Their capital, once thought impossible, became the foundation of a modern metropolis. The Aztecs rose because they mastered their environment, their enemies, and their beliefs. They fell because their world collided with another, armed with disease, steel, and an unwillingness to coexist. This is not legend. This is what happens when power, faith, and history meet without mercy.